as you grow and you go into different directions, you find that those skills that you picked up along the way, how valuable they are. So it was a constant learning process, like that you realize sometimes the things that you experienced in the past, you utilize them in the present and you didn't even expect it, you know?
That's Kyle Hunter, otherwise known as K Sparks, an accomplished hip-hop musician, ghostwriter, and chief executive officer of Rhythm Couture, a music licensing company that provides music production for ads, television, and film. Kyle's career mashup has always entailed building new skills to grow his capabilities along the way. And while developing his hard skills have been valuable for his career advancement, it's really been the soft skills like emotional intelligence that have been instrumental to helping him be the effective leader he is today.
So dealing in the music industry, there's a lot of different personalities that you have to deal with. You find a lot of people do a lot of projecting. So it's like you're dealing with people and their personalities instead of them taking accountability for things, like they're going to pass the role or pass the buck on someone else. It helped me in the role that I am right now as a CEO because I've mastered how to deal with people. And I feel that like now, no matter what type of personality type it is, I know how to engage them and I know how to maneuver.
So how did Kyle develop and refine those abilities that helped him reach and expand his growth potential? Welcome to Strategic Momentum, the pod course with actionable tips, inspiring stories, and practical advice from progressive leaders on what it takes to break through business and career inertia and understand the business of work. I'm your host, Connie Steele. We all know the importance of building the necessary skills to grow in our career, whether it's advancing in the role that we're currently in or it's pivoting into a different role or industry. And oftentimes we emphasize building and optimizing those hard skills like coding, writing, or design. Yet in today's new world of work, soft skills matter, and they matter even more to create the strategic momentum we are looking for. Because at the end of the day, we are dealing with people, not machines. Kyle Hunter is a musician, lyricist, performer, griot, futurist marketer, and entrepreneurial businessman. That's his career mashup. He's written over 500 songs, with his music having over 6 million streams on Spotify. Kyle's music career includes performances with artists such as Kendrick Lamar, Kanye West, and Q-Tip, as well as being nominated for Best New Artist and Best Hip Hop Record. Now, as the CEO of Rhythm Couture, he works globally with an eclectic mix of exceptionally talented musicians and producers. He has favorably impacted and shifted the music product placement paradigm. His music has been in Monster Energy, Kevin Kline, Marie Claire, Vans, and even LeBron James's Powerade campaign. And he's also a podcaster, helping others get to the next level in their personal life through inspirational stories, motivating insights, and advice. Because for him, it's always been about paying it forward. Let's learn more about Kyle's journey.
My career journey, it started out in Queens, New York. That's where I'm from, born and raised. There were a lot of cultural influences in Queens. If anybody's familiar with Queens, you know, we have Run DMC, LL Cool J, Nas, 50 Cent. So growing up, culturally, music was a big component for us growing up in Queens. So I remember seeing a lot of the different musicians and just actually taking a real liking to music. So I started writing a lot of poetry in addition to drawing because I was very artistic too. Like I love drawing. And music was one of those things pretty much like I would do on the fly. So I didn't take it serious at first in the beginning. It was more so like, all right, you know, a side hobby or whatever, freestyling when I could. I spent a lot of time doing art. I had got this summer, quote unquote, internship with Cooper Union for architecture, right? And it was a filler. They were filling us out to see who would actually be able to go through the whole process. And I did not do very well at that. I wasn't committed to the process. I was more into music. So after I had deviated from that, I just started doing music more so, just pouring a lot of time into it, a lot of consistency. And I started doing mixtapes locally in Queens. And the first mixtape I put out, I had a bold statement. I said, hip hop is dead. And I got all these flyers posted up, and we just flooded Queens with the flyers, the posters, because we knew it had shock value that someone saying hip hop is dead. And this is actually way before Nas even dropped that album. We put that out there as a promo run. And the buzz grew from there. From that point, like locally, people started picking up the mixtapes. I put out more mixtapes, put out more records, started getting notoriety from a lot of different record people and writing for different musicians. And then from that point, I got a couple record deals. Those record deals propelled me to actually get into music licensing. So I started doing music for TV, for film. And then from that point, I started my own company, Rhythm Couture. And we've been off and running ever since, placing music for artists in all different types of mediums. So that's pretty much in a nutshell, compressed. Yeah, it's a lot there.
You had mentioned that you had this talent in art. Certainly, obviously, had in writing. But that experience that you had at Cooper Union, how do you think some of that, though, influenced the way that you think about music and the way you think about some of the things you do, or eventually what you chose to do within music?
Well, yeah, definitely. So I remember the first day at Cooper Union, they had some of the art professors there. And they tell you to show your art portfolio. So their whole role was to, I guess, critique it. And I remember I drew a picture of a warrior princess. And the warrior princess, she had it was like a scroll. And on the scroll, it said, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. If anybody's not familiar with that, that's a scripture from the Bible. So the professor says, well, you need to stay away from these types of statements. And I'm like, well, why? Why do I have to do that? Right? Because you said so, I have to. And she's like, well, because it's art. And I'm like, yeah, well, art is expression. So if you're expressing yourself and how you feel, I was like, let me ask you something. I said, you don't believe that no weapon formed against you shall prosper? Like, is this a sore spot for you? I'm like, because I would think you would believe that, no matter what people do to you, that you're going to come out on top. And then she paused. She was like, you have a good point. You have a good point. But she was like, still, it's art, so you should try to stay away from it. But I say all that to say that moment reaffirmed to me that at the end of the day, you have to be true to yourself and what you believe. And you're going to encounter a lot of people, especially in business, who they come with their own baggage, their own beliefs, their own hangups, but you still have to be true to yourself. So for me, that moment in time, thinking back on that, I didn't let that deter me from always expressing myself and being expressive and being true to myself, because I ultimately believe no matter what you do, you have to be passionate about it and you have to believe in it. So I believed in myself. I believed in everything that I said, that I stood behind. And I transcended that into business moving forward. Like, even if there were things that were being done in certain types of industries, I would always strive to be disruptive in a good way, meaning to change the narrative. If artists were being mistreated, I'm like, all right, well, we're not going to do contracts like that. We're going to give fair contracts. So that I would say that highlighted one point that stood out in my mind, in regards to that.
That experience in art school, where Kyle was pressured to conform, made him realize the need to express his true self so he could ultimately be his whole self. And that transcended everything he did in music as well as business.
Musically, for me, I always tell people I make music for myself first. And then whoever appreciates it, that's a bonus. But I don't go into the recording process saying, I have to make a record that sounds like this, or I have to make a record that'll get radio play. Like, I'm always thinking about, all right, what is it that I want to convey? I'm going to express that, and then we'll take it from there. So yeah, that's important. And I feel like the most successful people, that's the blueprint. It's staying true to who you are. Because if you don't, ultimately, you're cheating yourself and other people, because there's plenty of people out there that could relate to you. They could relate to your story, and you're robbing them of that experience. So yeah, being true, being transparent, that's always been one of my mantras, you know?
Mm-hmm. Tell us about too, when you made that pivot from, you were a musician and then you're doing ghostwriting. How did you even get into ghostwriting? Because there were definitely specific career phases that you had. You're an artist, you focus on making the music, but then ghostwriting, and then ultimately going into the business side of things.
Right. So I used to record out of a recording studio in Ozone Park. And in that studio, there were a lot of musicians that came in and out of there, and a lot of record executives too. So a lot of times you write musical compositions, and it might not necessarily be for you. It's sometimes being a ghostwriter, I liken it to being like a fashion designer, right? You can have all these beautiful pieces of work. Doesn't mean that you're going to wear every piece because it might not be for you. And that's how it is musically. It's like you write all these wonderful compositions, and everything might not necessarily be tailored to you as a musician. So that's what started happening. I started writing hooks, referencing songs for R&B singers, rappers, all these different types of entertainers. And the label execs that would frequent that studio, we would pitch them. So sometimes we would have musical compositions where we would just do a hook and say, hey, do you guys want to buy this record? And they'd be like, oh yeah, we like this record. So, it just kind of just took a life of its own. And it's fulfilling too, when I was able to hear the finished product and say, oh, wow, that singer killed that hook. She did it exactly like I thought it would be in my head. So it was it's fulfilling.
And then how did that take you into this new direction of creating Rhythm Couture? Did you ever know that you wanted to be a CEO of your own music licensing company? Or was your sort of initial path like, no, I want to be, a musician. I want to be a rapper. And then, look at where you are now.
It was never my goal to be a CEO of a music licensing company. Like in the beginning, music licensing wasn't a thing that was even on my radar. Like I got approached by an individual by the name of Sarah. And Sarah is an A&R for a big music licensing company. And this was about 10 years ago, before I even knew what licensing was. And she sent me an email. She said, hey, I love your music. I represent a company that would love to pitch your music for television and film. And at first I thought it was a scam because I get so many emails, and anybody that's in business, you get all these emails and you got to filter who's who. And you're like, how did this even make it past the spam folder? I got to call Google. This isn't working. But I gave her a shot because I was like, what do I have to lose? They weren't asking for money from me. They said, if we get something placed for you, then we will split it 50-50. It was fair. It was equitable. So I signed the agreement, and I want to say maybe like 3 months later, they had like $5,000 or $6,000 for me. And I was like, oh, I'm like, all right, this is actually a thing. That was my first experience with the world of licensing and actually having a song that you own in perpetuity, and people are merely paying you just to use that song. So I started racking up placements. I mean, Powerade with LeBron James, Monster Energy, Calvin Klein, Marie Claire, all these different companies just having my music on TV and in film. And then it got to the point I had hundreds of placements. And just over time, the notoriety, I had people calling me, hey, I just heard your song, in a TV commercial. I'm like, oh, cool. It was so many placements. I couldn't even keep up with the placements. So it got to the point where I knew so many talented musicians at the same time that were trying to get into music licensing. But like with anything, it's really boils down to not only the talent, but who you know and who knows you. So a lot of them wouldn't get the opportunity. So I spoke with my friend, Robert, who's also a talented musician, and he knows a lot of talented musicians. And we were saying, hey, you know what? We should really put together a music licensing company because we know so many talented musicians, and there's a plethora of musicians out there that need a shot too as well. So yeah, it just took off.
So is it fair to say that somewhat of this, you're just going with the flow and testing and learning along the way to find this traction with music licensing, in which you wouldn't have even known that's an opportunity. But certainly it sounds like as part of your broader almost mission and goals. One is to support other artists who knew you were talented. But in addition, you saw this as an opportunity to just grow your music business in parallel.
Yeah, absolutely. And it provided a platform for a lot of musicians who didn't have it because a lot of them were so talented and they were just hidden gems that needed an opportunity. And that's what it boils down to at the end of the day, giving a voice to the voiceless because there's so many talented people out there, but they just don't have a shot. You know, a lot of times it boils down to connections. And if you don't have those connections, then you just go through the cycle of just shooting your shot, getting shot down. So yeah, we took it and we just ran with the model and just took it to a whole nother level.
That's amazing. So in what way do you think your unique combination of roles, experiences, and skills you've acquired over the years, how has that made you unique and impactful? And how do you think that's helped you personally and professionally?
I would say, being on both sides of the story. And when I say the story, I mean the good and the bad, right? So experiencing what it's like to be new in the industry and not having a voice and knowing what that's like, dealing with the rejection, dealing with the letdowns, dealing with the lack of follow through, unprofessionalism, all the things that you encounter on the bad side. And then now being on the good side, where it's like, all right, I'm in a role of leadership and in a role of impact to be able to have a positive impact and be a voice to the voiceless. So I know what it's like to be on the other side. So I think that it's good when you have that duality because I know what artists are going through that are trying to make it. And I know what I can do to help those artists. So I think it's like the perfect marriage, actually. I think a lot of times when people get in roles of power and they don't know what it's like to be on the other side, they're pretty prone to make a lot of mistakes because they're out of touch. They don't know what that experience is like. So I'm fortunate for the losses because I don't call them losses, I call it experience. So all that experience that I had in the form of losses helped to make me a more better leader.
It's because of you failing forward and
Yeah,
that ongoing learning and growth that came from failing forward that's enabled you to build a business that can accomplish a broader set of goals, not one that's
absolutely.
minimal, not one that is more narrow and solely focused on revenue generation, but equally as important, it is having a positive impact and growing artists. To your point, it's giving a voice to the voices, which in totality really creates that level of fulfillment and success for you.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's about paying it forward, and everything that I do is like, I just want to help people. Like that's important. I think there's enough people in this industry that are self-involved and narcissistic. And it's like, we don't need any more of those people. We want good people. So we make it a point to make our company a company that's very family orientated, a company that strives to help musicians be the best version of themselves. So definitely that's the focal prime point of what Rhythm Couture is about and what I'm about.
To get to where Kyle is now, it wasn't a straight line journey. He's had failures like the rest of us, but knew that to propel himself forward, that inevitably meant learning from those failures and continuing to test and learn along the way to see what fits. And all those roles, experiences, interests, and passions have enabled Kyle to grow into a multifaceted individual and now leader with a clear mission to pay it forward.
So, I wear a lot of different hats, a whole lot of hats. And I think that the thing that I can say to really help guide people is that don't be afraid to learn on the job, quote unquote. So a lot of times we wear these different hats and we try to not make mistakes, but that's a mistake within itself because that's how you learn. So I think just learning on the job and going with the flow. Like when I was a musician, which I still am, I just went with the flow and I continue to go with the flow. Like things aren't going to be perfect, but you learn through the imperfections how to perfect the craft in the process. So making music, it was hit or miss plenty of times. You would do records and you think the record's gonna blow up, go platinum, and it's a dud. So you learn from experience. Being a CEO, learning how to manage people and manage expectations. Those are two critical components that I learned because you have to manage what it is that people expect of you and manage the reality of what it is that you can deliver and have a direct, open communication with them. So that way, no one is left with a false sense of hope in regards to what's not done. It's like, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to execute it and move forward. In terms of now, I'm also doing e-courses. I'm doing a podcast as well. So just all these different dynamics, constantly learning. It's like every day is a learning process. I'm learning on the job, but it's okay because learning is something that it helps us, it propels us to the next level. So I would say, don't be afraid to learn on the job. Don't feel like you have to have it all together all the time.
Building those various skills you need along the way is a consistent and persistent effort of trial and error. But it's also understanding that you will inevitably learn and gather data on what's working, what isn't, and where to focus going forward. A great example of that is a series Kyle, or I should say K Sparks, did entitled Manic Mondays. Every Monday for an entire year, he released an original song to the internet. And this was during the heightened digital era of blogs in the late 2000s. And in total, Manic Monday amassed over 525,000 digital downloads. Kyle shares the learning he gained from doing it.
How did you go about testing, learning, and iterating to develop the amazing music that you did? And then how did you realize I need this skill, number one, to be a great rapper? And then how do I get there? And then how did you know how to define the next skills to be a great ghostwriter? So tell me about that a little bit more.
Definitely. So the first thing that I'll talk about is how to be a great rapper, quote unquote. So to be a great rapper or a musician, period, the foundation or the fundamental aspect of that is you have to master intonation and connotation. So if anybody's not familiar with that, that's basically your ability to fluctuate your voice, the emotion behind it, and you're basically selling it what you're saying. And a lot of times some musicians lack that. And that's why when they say, oh, well, I can't really feel the music, it's because they lack that passion. They lack that fluctuation of the tone. And because of that lack, you can't really feel the music. So to be a great musician, you have to convey that passion that you have for the writing into the actual performance piece of it. So there's a direct correlation between the two. I would say that, focusing on that is key and that's critical. And what helped me also too was Manic Mondays, because releasing a new song every week for an entire year, you go through a lot of trial and error. And we were able to see the statistics for each song. So if we released a song and that particular song got 100,000 downloads, we would say, oh, wow, this is something here. There's interest in this song. And then if we released the song and it only got let's say 15,000 downloads. You say, all right, the interest is not as high as it was for the song that had 100,000. And we were able to look at the song performance for each song every week. And then we could say, all right, you know what? Let's compile an album with all the songs that hit at least the 100,000 mark, because we know that these songs are performance based. So I think a lot of it is trial and error, making sure that you're able to gauge and quantify what you're doing. So I would say the metrics are important. Like for any musician out there, make sure that you're constantly in the state of taking those metrics. You're looking at the downloads, you're looking at the streams, you're looking at what regions these songs are being played at. And more specifically, like which songs are more popular in certain regions, because obviously this is post-COVID right now, so touring is down. But once things pick up, all right, if I have a record that's getting 250,000 streams a month in Germany, well, then, you need to go to Germany and do a show. Like it's all numbers based. So, it's helped now, especially with things changing with digital outlets. Because when I first started, I want to say like in 2008 is when I started the actual Manic Monday series. But things were different, even though the internet was a thing. a lot of these different statistics that are available now to artists, I didn't have at the time. So, for example, Apple, they have the ability for the Apple Artist platform where you can log in and you can see how many Shazams you got for one song. You can see how many streams. I wasn't privy to that when I first started. So, now things have changed and artists can leverage that information to actually, monetize their music even bigger.
When you start to learn some of these skills, so let's go back to even your Manic Mondays, right? Where you're putting things out every week and you're trying to express all these talents. I'm sure for many people who have any sort of artistic talent, you want that first one to be like the hit, but it doesn't always happen that way. So how did you just keep yourself going? I think a lot of people sometimes feel it's a big bang, like I need to have the thing. A lot of times it's not. It's actually starting small and growing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a saying that I love, and it says, don't let the internet discourage you because not everyone is posting their failures. And I think people get that feeling from social media because when you go on social media, everyone is winning and everyone is happy. And it's like, oh man, you internalize that in some way. Like you start to feel like, wow, I need to catch up, or I'm doing something wrong, right? You start to develop a little bit of self-doubt. As much confidence as you may have, it's like you feel competitive. So I think just putting things in proper perspective and always realizing to run your race, right? Like you can be persistent and don't compare your story to someone else because everybody's on a different chapter, right? You might be on chapter 1, but you're comparing yourself to someone who's on chapter 12 of their own book. And you don't know all the things that happen in those chapters leading up to their chapter 12. So at the end of the day, run your own race, stay consistent, stay persistent, and everything will come in its proper timing. Like you can't rush it. You can't rush proper progress. It's like, would you rather something be done quick or rather something be done at a slower pace, but ultimately refined and correct? That's the most important thing.
I love your point about, and my kind of key takeaway is that when you broke down the goal to be a great musician and rapper, you break it down into that those core components, but it was the testing, learning, measuring on a consistent basis, and you're building it small and it continues to almost be like a flywheel. And then you start to assess what works and what doesn't work. And then it continues to grow and have momentum over time.
That's it. Reminds me of Jeff Bezos when he talks about the flywheel. He talks about that a lot, and it's true. It's true. It's like, I think people underestimate that. And that's important. Like, you should never be in a state of confusion where you're just throwing stuff out there and hoping it sticks to the wall. Like there's always metrics. So you have to have the fortitude to say, all right, let me make sure I'm taking constant inventory of what's performing well and what's not. Because we all know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, thinking it's going to change. It's like, that's crazy. It's like, all right, let's get some metrics going here. Let's make sure that we're making sense with what we're doing.
Absolutely. What skills did you find to be most valuable to develop as you continually pivoted along your journey to create what it is you really wanted?
That's a great question. I would say, two things. I would say the first thing is persistence. I think a lot of people don't succeed because they give up. And they give up because they feel like it's just not working. But a lot of times it's not that something's not working. It's just the approach might be the wrong approach. So going back to looking at metrics to actually take the time to see what's working and what's not working can help you refine it. So I think persistence is the first thing. And I think the second thing too is humility. And when you talk about humility, I think they get it misconstrued. They think of humility in the sense of you're a pushover. And not that. There's actually strength in humility, right? Some of the most strongest people have humility and they've mastered that. So what that means is that you're not overcompensating with a personality that is obnoxious, right? You are confident enough in your abilities to know that you don't have to project in that way, because your work and just your work ethic within itself speaks for itself. So, having humility and being humble and still having a great work ethic, that speaks louder than someone in the room who's arrogant and boisterous.
Building the hard skills is one thing that is most tangible and definable. But to really grow and accelerate in your career, what's even more important in this new world of work are the soft skills. Those skills of persistence, humility, as Kyle mentioned, are critical, but not always top of mind for many. But companies, no matter how big or small, are made up of people. So the more you are able to understand that human dynamic, the more you'll be able to accelerate. And those skills gained over the years across those very experiences you may have will inevitably help you steer, navigate, and grow in your career, whatever it may be. And one of them is building that emotional intelligence, as Kyle shares.
In what ways do you feel you leveraged past skills that you built and experiences gained from early parts of your career, and then apply them to these subsequent roles that you have?
So dealing in the music industry, there's a lot of different personalities that you have to deal with. A lot of different personalities. And you find a lot of people do a lot of projecting. So it's like you're dealing with people and their personalities, and instead of them taking accountability for things, there's always a lot of projecting, like they're going to pass the role or pass the buck on someone else. So I dealt with a lot of people in that capacity, but it helped me in the role that I am right now as a CEO, because I've mastered how to deal with people. And I feel that now, no matter what type of personality type it is, I know how to engage them and I know how to maneuver. And that's important, because it's like I deal with a lot of different people and everybody has a need, everybody has a want. And you have to be able to assess, well, is this transaction, is this going to be equitable here? Or is this just something where someone's just trying to take from us or just want to use our company and leverage us and we're not getting anything out of it? So it's helped me in that regard, like having all those past experiences with different people in the music business. Dealing with those different types of personalities early on in the music business, I've encountered a lot of different personalities, but I've been able to master that, how to deal with them and how to navigate those different personalities. So now being in the role that I'm in right now, that has really helped me a lot, because it gets challenging week to week dealing with a lot of different personalities, and whether it be from our own artists, right? Or it can be from other people, from other companies. The emails get a bit atrocious sometimes. It's seriously, someone took the time to write this. But,
But would you say, because companies at the end of the day are made up of people. And in today's world of work, if you don't really understand people, it's going to be hard for you as a leader to know how to best move a collective group of people to move forward, or even an individual.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say that it's almost a core skill that you need to learn and that you found incredibly valuable is EQ?
Oh, yeah.
That you've built EQ.
Without a doubt. That is something that everybody needs. Everybody needs it. Because, without it, it's clear as day. It's you're going to be at a deficit.
Did you know that early on? So early on in your career, did you realize how important the soft skills and EQ would be relative to the hard skills in growing and accelerating your career, no matter where it would take you?
It's crazy. It goes back to learning on the job. At the time, I didn't. You kind of just do it and it becomes like an instinct. But as you grow, like you say, and you go into different directions, you find that those skills that you picked up along the way, how valuable they are. So it was a constant learning process, that you realize sometimes the things that you experienced in the past, you utilize them in the present and you didn't even expect it,
And you also find that in some of those skills that you had in the past, maybe you didn't like them, but inevitably they came back to be valuable and you used it again in the present day. And you it finally connects in a way that you never realized it before. But everything seems to be one in which you're almost talent stacking. You're building and you're building like Lego bricks. You don't know how they inevitably connect, but each piece of knowledge, experience, skill, wisdom you gain will help you going forward. So this non-linear path isn't a bad thing. All you're doing is building those skills and experiences.
Yep. Everything comes full circle, at the end of the day. Like, it comes full circle. And we don't know it in the moment, but ultimately you're like, oh, well, I can see why that happened now because of this.
And so you are a total example of a career mashupper, which I talk about, which is, it's that combination of roles, skills, experiences, hobbies, interests, passions that either combine into a portfolio career, which you have, or one where somebody has taken this nonlinear journey and they've been able to bring it all together to really deliver value. So knowing you've been a very successful career mashupper, where do you think people get stuck and struggle most in being able to create their own?
I think, it goes back to the saying, a lot of people are a jack of all trades, but a master of none. So it's like, you have to be able to strike a balance, and a healthy balance at that. So if you're passionate about a lot of different things, that's awesome. That's great. But you have to make sure that you take the time to refine each thing, because you don't want to be a person who is like, all right, you see these people all the time. Like, I don't know if you saw the show Martin, the comedy show, but you remember the guy, Hustle Man? It's like Hustle Man, he always had a hustle. He's selling t-shirts, he's selling sneakers, he's selling deodorant. And you don't want to be Hustle Man. It's like, like you want to be respected for what you do, and you want to be known as someone who does it well. So it's a lot of hustle mans out there, for lack of better words. Like, they do all these different things, but nothing really well, nothing refined. So that's the thing. Like, just take the proper time and dedicate it to each thing and just refine it. Just become great at what you do.
And so it's about really kind of creating that plan and that compass and being very clear on that, so you master it, and then you can continue to add and expand on what it is that you've started with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And what advice do you have in helping people break through, the inertia they may have and act on their passions, interests to reach their potential?
I would say, fear cripples people a lot of times. So they overthink things, they overanalyze it. And it's like, I hear a lot of people say the quotes like, I got to get out of my own head sometimes, right? It's like, just getting over whatever it is that's holding you back. And most of the time it's yourself and your thoughts. So just to stop overthinking things so much, and sometimes just take that leap of faith and actually just do it. Because you'll never get to your destination if you never start your journey. And that's just the reality, right? If you want to go on this trip, you got to pack your bags, you got to book the plane ticket, So and your dreams and your goals are the same way. If you want to get to that destination, well, then you got to start taking action, taking steps and saying, all right, you know what? I'm going to write down a log, and Monday I'm going to do this. Tuesday I'm going to do this. Wednesday, I'm going to do this, and make it something that's realistic. Like you pretty much, you have a game plan for how you want to get to where you're going to go. And we all know that game plans and strategies, they change because you have to adjust, and that's okay. But at least start at the bare minimum with some type of framework for a blueprint of where you want to go to. And then if you have to adjust, you adjust, but just start.
To close, what's the best work advice you've ever received?
Wow, the best advice I've ever received. Collaboration is greater than competition. So realizing that the power and the importance of collaborating with like-minded people. We've always heard your network is your net worth. And that is so true. At the end of the day, surrounding yourself with like-minded people that want similar things as you and have a similar work ethic, you'll be able to get more done, as opposed to just trying to do everything yourself and feeling overwhelmed, feeling like there's not enough time in a day. I know for me personally, if I tried to do everything myself, it would be chaotic, so that's why I have a great team. and everybody knows their role. Everybody's great at their role, and we get it done. We definitely get it done.
And finally, what's the best way listeners can connect with you?
But there's a couple of ways. They can go to rhythmcouture.com, and that's my company's website. They can also go to Instagram at Rhythm Couture Biz. Also mine's, what I have too is at K Sparks Music and at Music Licensing. And I mean, if people want to connect on social media, they can. They can connect to our business website. And yeah, we always keep an open door.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing, one, not your story, but really also the important lessons along the way to effectively build that career mashup and have that persistence, that focus, and that collaboration, not competition,
yes. Mm-hmm.
Because your network is your net worth.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I had so much fun learning about Kyle's story. For those of us who aren't in the music business like myself, hearing about his career experiences, wisdom, and insights continues to highlight the same personal and professional goals, motivations, attitudes, and aspirations that today's individuals have. These are all important trends when it comes to really understanding the future of work, because it's humans at the end of the day that drive the work we all do. And while those jobs of the future are expected to be more machine-powered and data-driven than in the past, it's social skills such as communication, collaboration, and emotional intelligence that will be in higher demand. So we all have to be talent stacking both the hard and soft skills continuously. But remember, it takes practice, and it doesn't happen overnight. Kyle likes to say, persistence beats resistance. And we all have a tendency to resist moving forward because of the fear that often creeps in when we are looking to do something new or break free of the norms we have been living with. And yes, it will feel uncomfortable when you start, but the more you do it, the more confidence you will develop over time to the point where it might even be a considerable strength for you in the end. Like Kyle said, stay consistent, stay persistent, and everything will come in the end, because you can't rush proper progress. Thanks for listening to Strategic Momentum. To connect with Kyle, you can find him on Instagram at Rhythm Couture Biz or at K Sparks Music. To understand more about the future of work and build the hard and soft skills, go to bizofyou.co to get your copy of Building the Business of You. In the book, you'll learn how to employ a dynamic strategic planning process to help you be the CEO of you, while also discovering the compelling stories of other career mashuppers like Kyle that will inspire you towards action. The book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If you've liked what you heard in this pod course, please follow the show and share this episode with friends and colleagues. And of course, we always appreciate ratings and reviews. You can also get show notes, links, and more tips and advice from this episode at strategicmomentum.co. I'm Connie Steele, and you've been listening to the Strategic Momentum Podcast.